Yeah, hi there. So thanks for the introduction, Richard. I'm Roberto Sordillo. I'm a city success manager at Voi. What does that mean? It basically means working with the local partnerships, councils and police, as well as internally at Voi to deliver a service and roll out a service within our cities throughout the United Kingdom. So yeah, I'm happy to be here for Merge Futures Northampton. It's one of our, it's one of our biggest trial areas at the moment. Going very well, I would say. So without further ado, I'll kick off the presentation. So I just wanted to start off with a little teaser of here's present day at the moment in Northampton, and I think at Voi, we've pledged ourselves to what we call the 15-minute cities. So and if you ever look at the Voi vision, it's cities made for living. So and this is, I mean, this is not a Voi image, but it's an image of how we envisage something of a future city and how we think about mobility and getting around the city. And you can see here, it's much more pedestrianized. It accommodates mixed traffic. There's a man on an e-scooter. There's someone on a bike. It still accommodates car traffic, but we're thinking about maybe taking away some of the road space in favor of other types of ways of navigating the city, and just also how it's designed with a level deck, no curb. It seems like it feels more pedestrianized and it will naturally calm the speed of the traffic down within cities. And if you think about of a 15-minute city, here's a nice little graphic that I pulled from I stole this one, to be honest with you, but I think it's a great way to visualize what we mean by a 15-minute city. So the 15-minute city may be defined as an ideal geography where most human needs and many desires are located within a travel distance of 15 minutes. Now, of course, that travel distance does depend on the type of transport you take. If you walk, you're not going to cover much distance, less than a mile. If you take a bike, which is equivalent to an e-scooter, we're looking at speeds of around about 12 miles per hour, which is the Voi scooters are actually capped at 12.5 miles per hour. You could cover sort of 3 miles within 15 minutes. So what we were talking about here is, what within our 3-mile vicinity can we have available to us? And if you think about how UK cities are designed at the moment, a lot of them are not designed like that. They're a very centralized type of focus in the town centre or the high street. And then if you go out to the suburbs, typically it's just residential. So we need to really think about how we mix that city infrastructure up within there. I'm just going to go on to a little bit about how Voi works. This is our version 4 scooter, which is currently on the streets of Northampton. Lots of innovation here, so I'll take you through some of the stuff that we have. The first thing to note is that we actually have a unique vehicle ID. You can see that here, it's on the side of the scooter and on the back. Now, anyone on this call, anyone who sees this in general public can actually report users who are riding the scooter. So if you consider them, participating in antisocial behavior or perhaps riding on the pavement where they shouldn't, they can be reported, and we do follow up. So of course we have telemetry on all our users. We can find out who it is. We track and we do follow up with this. So, and we follow up either with what's called a strike, and we're quite a strict policy at the moment on this. We're clamping down a lot on what we consider antisocial behavior. Of course, it's not as simple as that. When you consider some people who ride on pavements, it's perhaps because at the moment cities don't feel safe when you ride on the road. So it's not always a case of people just wanting to ride on the pavement for the sake of it. So there is a delicate balance. However, rules are rules, and this is what UK rules are at the moment. You can't ride scooters on the pavement unless they're shared use paths or designated shared use paths. So we have this four-digit ID code, and we can follow up with user, issue a strike, which they then have to take an ride like Voila, which is our traffic school, and they also have a 7-day ban. Second strike is a 30-day ban, and then a third strike is a permanent ban. So we're very strict on it, and it's just a policy that we've adopted at the moment. With this scooter, you also there's lots of innovation on this. We have IoT, so Internet of Things high accuracy GPS. This is actually GNSS for anyone who's a bit of a tech geek. We use it's a combination of the different global positioning constellations such as Galileo satellite and also GPS, which is the American satellite constellation. So we get a very, very high accuracy on the scooter. However, it's not just determined by the GPS, it's also determined by the ping rate, which is I guess the signal that communicates back and forth to the scooter. With each iteration, this is the version 4, we're improving all the time. So I'm sure the version 5 will improve upon, the version 4. As well as this, we have things like a phone holder. We have turn indicators, which I think is a UK first on an e-scooter. So there's a little button on the handlebar. You can click it, and you can, if you're turning right, it signals right. And you have if you look here, you've got a turn indicator at the back here, and you have one on the front here as well by the handlebar. So all in all, this is quite an innovative scooter. And if you, I don't know if you have ridden one, but if you have, you'll probably see that it's very stable too. It has 10-inch wheels rather than the de facto standard of 8.5-inch, which makes a huge difference. They're pneumatic, so they're air-filled. There's also suspension, and the battery is in the base of the scooter, so the weight is distributed at the bottom. So they're very, very stable, feel very solid, and they can, UK roads sometimes have a lot of potholes, so they're designed really to withstand that hit. This is the Voi app. So this is to take you through the user journey. I mean, if you want to start riding the scooter for the first time, you actually have to have your driving license available. You do a driving license scan, and then it's a verification process by a company called Onfido, which they're very popular in Europe, I think, actually, to be honest with you, for many providers for driving license verification. Once that has been verified, you can then add your payment, and then you can start riding the scooter. Once you ride the scooter, you've got the cost there, and then the time, and I'll go through after what the pricing structure is of Voi there, and then you can see the basics. So how what the battery life is, for example, what your estimated range is, and what the scooter ID is. And then once you finish your ride, you can do a ride summary, then feedback to us, which we do actually look at the feedback, and we review some of the ride analysis post rides. So this is how I guess this is how we operate within cities, and probably super important, more for the UK than any other city that we operate outside of the UK. Again, because it's a very regulated trial here, we've gone to big lengths really to try and integrate within the city as much as possible. So we have no riding zones. So this is where the scooters just basically cut power once you get into the no riding zone. It's not instant. There's a bit of because of the ping, you get a couple of seconds into it, and then the scooter cuts out basically. And then you essentially have to just walk the scooter back. It doesn't lock, so it still can free roll, but you have to walk it back into the riding zone again before it picks up. We have a slow speed zone. This is limited in some cities to 5 miles per hour, and in others 7 miles per hour. And we typically use this. Sometimes it could be outside schools. It could be, as it says here, near bodies of water, places where, or shared paths are quite a good example of where a slow speed zone works well, where we just want to restrict the scooter down to almost walking pace to limit the impact on mainly on pedestrians. Very, very, very useful tool. However, again, it's one of these things, if you overuse it or you use it at, say, of a junction or something like that, it could actually be more dangerous. So you have to be very careful about where you implement slow speed zones. No parking zones. This is more for free floating models. So cities where you can leave your scooter anywhere. We can actually restrict off areas of no parking zones. And I think businesses particularly like this because maybe they want their business to be served, but they don't want their scooters to be left right outside, for example, their door. So we can set no parking zones. Sort of, I guess the accuracy has to be, 3 or 4 meters by 4 meters for it to work, but it's pretty good. I mean, it stops people from, once you try and end the ride in a no parking zone, it just won't let you do it. And then there's incentivized parking zones. We use these a lot. So even though we run a free float model, we try and get people to park in certain spots because we appreciate, there is street clutter. We want the streets to stay tidy. We don't want scooters abandoned everywhere. So we try and incentivize our users to park in certain areas, and they just get money off their ride if they end their ride in incentivized parking zones. And we've done a lot of studies on this, and this is like super effective. I mean, it really does work. And then we have mandatory parking zones. So these mandatory parking zones are basically where in cities where we enforce certain parking hubs, and users just have to leave or end their ride in the mandatory parking zone. And if they don't, they're essentially abandoning their scooter, which then leads to a £25 fine. So we're essentially forcing the user into a spot, and that could just be a virtual hub, or it could be a rack, for example. And then as it says on the tin, the operating zone. So that's just a service in the trial area. And if you look at Northampton, there's been several expansions since launch where we've increased the operating area in conjunction with the council. So Voi's operations also try where we can to use e-cargo bikes and e-vans. It's all part of our sustainable vision. We're trying to get to carbon positive. We're at carbon neutral at the moment. However, I think it's the last 15% or something of our carbon energy that we produce, we offset. But eventually, we're actually trying to get into a net carbon positive. So we do in our operations quite often around the UK use e-cargo bikes for battery swapping. We use trailers for repositioning scooters, and then we use e-vans for collecting scooters that need maintenance or rebalancing scooters around cities. So, I mean, it really does tie in with our transport vision. We don't want pollution in cities. We want clean air. So it makes sense that we try and use e-vans and e-cargo bikes where possible to rebalance our fleet. And we also look for energy suppliers that provide renewable energy. For example, Bob. However, there is instances where e-vans still don't have the range, and so from the main warehouse to the town that we're trying to supply. So we either try and use hybrids in that situation, or unfortunately, there's a situation where we still have normal vans. But I guess it's a work in progress for us, and we're investing heavily in trying to get our whole fleet into complete, electricity powered or EVs. This is our pricing model that I alluded to earlier on. It's £1 to unlock a Voi scooter at the moment, and it's 20p per minute thereafter. We have subscription packages, so monthly and day pass, which give you unlimited rides. Monthly pass is particularly good for commuters. People who want to use scooters frequently would find it quite expensive to use the pay-as-you-go model. So the subscription model kind of works better in that respect. We have Voi for All. Voi for All is for people who currently have an HC2 certificate. So it's a low income, it's defined as low income, and that offers a 75% discount on the monthly pass. We are looking to expand this out to people on job seekers allowance and disabilities allowance as well. So it's a bit of a work in progress at the moment about how we go about doing that. So we'll be refining some of these discounts going forward and trying to open them up to more people. It's part of what we think is, I guess, making our service more accessible as much as we can to as many people as we can. And then we've got Voi Students, which is a 20% discount, which just lowers their pass to £32 per month. And then finally, Voi for Heroes. It's a hugely popular scheme. I think we've definitely had over 100,000 rides now, but for free, that we've given up to NHS workers for Voi for Heroes. And it's going to be for free up until the end of lockdown easing. So now that's been extended back, I think, to the 19th of July. So from the 19th of July, it's still a 75% discount thereafter. So it's a huge discount for our Voi for Heroes NHS workers. So then the next section is going to be about safety, accessibility, and parking. So I just wanted to touch on rider safety as the first thing. What we found is, and we've done a bit of research, is that it seems as though most of the incidents or accidents occur on people's first ride, and then thereafter the risk of an accident falls as the user gets more experienced, which is obviously fairly logical. But to actually contextualize it, it means that what we need to do is try and intervene early on in someone's Voi user journey. We try to intervene on the very first ride. And so there are a couple of ways that we do that. One of them I've highlighted here is that we have a beginner's mode, which actually limits the speed of the scooter down to 15 kilometers per hour, which is about 9 miles per hour. And it makes a bit of a difference because, you know, at slow speeds, even if you do sort of have to fall off or you jump off, it doesn't really impact it's basically a jogging pace. And it also means that the user has a bit more time to navigate around corners, and if they brake a bit late, it builds in a little bit of tolerance into their riding. That being said, 12.5 miles per hour isn't particularly fast either. The DFT limit is 15.5 miles per hour, so we're already below that. And then the beginner's mode goes even further below that, so we limit the speed right down. We also do, there's something called a ride like Voila traffic score, which basically takes our users through a traffic score, shows them the basic, I guess it's a little bit like a theory, a bit of a highway code. And we incentivize users to do that and give them £5 credit if they do take that as well. And these are some of our other safety initiatives that we have. So this now touches more onto general public safety as well as rider safety. So we have things like tilt detection. So if you park the scooter and it falls over, we know that it's fallen over, and we can then send out our fleet operatives to go and rebalance that or repark that scooter into a hub, or just upright it and park neatly. So we do have a team on the ground that operate for the duration of the operating hours to sort of just tidy up our fleet, basically. We have the license verification. So you have to be 18 or over to ride a Voi scooter and have a provisional or full driving license. We use GPS, and I've touched on this before. It's quite high accuracy GPS. It's not just GPS really. It's a combination of different satellite constellations. And I think as most tech companies are, we're pretty data driven. We have lots of dashboards and we can see what's going on. We have a lot of telemetry on scooters. We can see where they are, if they're tilted, or if they're not tilted. There's all sorts of data that we get fed through real time. And we can see our fleet. We can see when someone's riding. We can end their ride if we have to. We can go and set tasks for scooters to go and collect scooters or repark them. And this is an ongoing work stream within Voi to constantly improve the way that we do our operations and optimize our fleet. And then finally, we have a report scooter. So if you just Google report scooter UK, we'll probably come up top for that search, and you can actually report either bad parking or bad riding. And the idea is that we want to get to a community-led approach so that we shape our service based upon community, and we constantly improve. So if there are hotspots where we get constant reports, we may look to review how we operate in those areas. So this is some of our parking solutions at the moment. We've collaborated with the RNIB on the Type 1 rack on the left there. And you can see we went from prototype to production and deployment. We did this all within a few months, really within the UK. And so what this is a parking rack with, if you see these sort of parallelograms at RNIB, what we call the RNIB side plates. So if you think about a blind user who uses a cane, for example, they need something to tap because they're swinging their cane from left to right. And so this tap-in or this side plate actually prevents, I guess, a visually impaired or a blind user from tripping or having the risk of tripping over the back of a scooter. So in areas where we think that there's a pedestrian risk there, we're starting to go back through our racks and implementing these side plates now on our racks, and also the color provides like a very strong visual contrast to the background, which is super important for visually impaired people as well. We're also experimenting with the introduction of Type 3 racks, what we call Type 3 racks, which can accommodate 12 scooters in their bays, but also probably a couple of more if we have to. And this can be used in place of a parking bay. And and I think what we're aiming for here really in Voi is a modal shift. So taking users out of cars in replacing those journeys with scooters. And so we think naturally that we should be allocated some car parking space, although very controversial when you think about how many scooters you can fit in one car parking bay and how many journeys that contributes to. It actually makes perfect sense. And if you think about the average mileage of let's say an average family car, those scooters in that bay that alone would cover way more than that. So it makes sense to encourage modal shift to actually take up some parking bays for scooters. We've done a bit of an analysis at Northampton station, and this is I guess the efficacy of parking racks. If you look on the left, this was the distribution of parked scooters or people ending rides before we implemented a rack. You can see that the distribution is reasonably sparse. So within a 5-meter radius of the front of the middle or the epicenter, we had 102 scooters ending rides. Within 10 meters, we had 170. Within 20 meters, we had 206. Within 30 meters, 234. Now, as soon as we implemented parking racks, what we found was the density, let's say the location that people ended their rides was much more concentrated in the epicenter. You can see that by the net figures. You could also see just by the visualization here how impactful a parking rack is in terms of tidying up street clutter. It's very, very important. So the way that Voi is now approaching cities in the UK is to have a mixed kind of model where in busy areas, in town centres, outside train stations, outside shopping centres, there needs to be physical or demarcated, it could be painted bays, for example, but demarcated parking infrastructure, just as you would for cars, for example, and reasonably regulated, because actually that gives people the impetus to park properly, or we can actually force that through mandatory parking zones. But as you go further out into the suburbs, and then that's where you can have more of a free float model, and perhaps someone wants to pop out of their house and jump on a scooter right into the town centre, it could be more liberal. But in the town centres, to have this kind of regulation will improve the service, and I think the acceptance from the general public in England as well. There's another measure that we have on top of this. So as you can probably start to gather, parking's a big issue for Voi at the moment, and so we're coming out with all these solutions where we think we can improve. And I guess it's not a silver bullet. We need to think about it as a mixed approach on how we improve the parking situation. We have something called Parking Cop. It basically forces our users to end their ride and take a photo of their scooter once they've ended their ride, either in certain locations, or if it's a free float model, the scooter needs to be parked properly, which means, for example, not blocking the pavement, parked to the side, and sort of aligned in the direction of the pedestrian traffic. And we analyze this within sort of 5 minutes, and then we come back with a response. And we have like a table of outcomes. So if it's good parking, nothing happens. If it's bad parking, we educate the user. If they do it again, we potentially fine the user. If it's not ideal parking, so it's not quite bad parking, but it could be improved, we then try and educate the user to say, look, next time, please park like this. And we send out an email to them to show them. And we're also now also trialing in-app messaging for this as well. So we're always trying to improve here. We're trying to get, I guess, don't know if you ever recall the nudge unit from David Cameron years and years back. It's about sort of nudging the behavior over time to improve. And then just on accessibility, we're actually trialing something with a company called Klaxon, which is, and this is the trials planned for Cambridge first of all, so it's not Northampton. However, if it's successful, we'd be looking to roll this out wider scale across the UK. It's basically, it clips onto a wheelchair and it turns it into a mobility scooter. So when we think about the 15-minute city vision that I alluded to at the beginning, if we do have segregated cycle lanes, we could actually turn wheelchair users into mobility scooter users without them actually having to buy a mobility scooter. So they could just pop out, go to a parking hub, pick up one of these, clip it onto their wheelchair, and then they can nip around town much faster than they probably could now. So this really is, I think, for me, this is one of the best innovations that we've come up with so far, or we've explored, and I really do hope to see this roll out across the UK, because I think, it just makes our service so much more accessible, because not everyone can obviously ride an e-scooter. So yeah, watch this space on the Klaxon Mobility wheelchair users. And then I just wanted to give a quick snapshot, and I'm sure some of you might be curious to see how our progress is so far in Northampton. So this is basically Northampton in stats. This was as of, I think about 2-3 days ago, I pulled these figures. So, I mean, these go up every day. There's a constant ticker. So this is already outdated. So we've had 405,000 rides, nearly 24,000 unique users, which is just crazy, because I think the population of Northampton is something like 220,000, isn't it? So it's almost 10% of the population have a Voi account in Northampton, which is, madness for me. Which is the equivalent of traveling 19 times around the equator, just to contextualize how far people have traveled in Northampton on a Voi scooter. And we find that the peak hour is from 5 till 6 p.m. in the evening, which kind of makes sense. It's generally the busiest hours. People just finishing work, and when the weather's good, I think people want to sort of explore a city around the scooter, or some people use them to commute home as well. We launched in Northampton on the 3rd of September, 2021, and so 2020. Sorry, that's a mistake. So we've been operating in Northampton for a while now. It's one of our first trial areas, and we have 1,100 scooters across the city. And just to contextualize, we operate in about 50 cities across Europe. 15 in the UK as well, Northampton being one of those. So Voi as a company is pretty big, and if you have a Voi account, for example, or a Voi pass, you can actually use that pass in other cities in the UK. So if you went to, say, Birmingham or Liverpool, but you're from Northampton and you've got a Voi pass in Northampton, you can use it in those cities too. So it's great for people who sort of don't want to drive to those cities but want to take a train there. And that sort of does lead me on. So I'll share that with you so you can just see the operating area in Northampton. Yeah, and this does lead me on nicely to the modal shift. So this is kind of an aggregation of the number of surveys that we've conducted. We've had tens of thousands of responses from our users. And the question asked was, think back to the last Voi ride, which mode of transport would you have taken if not an e-scooter? And so what we find is approximately 47% of people say that they would have walked the journey. 22% would have taken a car, 7% taxi, 9% bus, and bike about 7% too. So interestingly, we don't actually cannibalize the bike demand as much as you'd probably think. Most people who bike still want to bike. We do cannibalize the walking a lot. And I guess there's a bit of an ongoing discussion about that. But I mean, if you look at walking in terms of and scooter users, we're trying to do some comparisons at the moment. It's not really that clear cut in terms of, I think a lot of people say, well, walking's like healthier for you, et cetera, but if you ever had to ride a scooter, you still employ a little bit of core exercise and energy, and of course you get to the place a bit quicker, so it frees up your time. So there's pros and cons, to the walking. Now, of course, what we're really focused on for us is actually car and taxi, because if we imagine our cities of the future, these are the types of transports that we're hoping to minimize. And more significant, I think, in the UK than other cities, we actually do eat into the car usage and taxi usage a lot more than we first thought. I think in Sweden it was like 14% or something. So in the UK it's quite significant. So it's if you imagine 29% of all our journeys, and if we go back actually, we had 405,000 journeys. So let's say a third of those 120,000 journeys would have been taken by cars that now have been taken by scooters. It's a huge impact on the city. And so that's one aspect of it. And then we have another aspect, which is connected journeys. So the next thing that we're looking at now is, and we've got very early data for this, but we're looking at actually how many people who take a scooter also then want to go on a train, or, perhaps, let's say, for example, you live in Northampton, but you work in Birmingham, and you may have traditionally drove to Birmingham. Now you could take a Voi scooter to the train station, jump on the train to Birmingham, get off at Birmingham, and then take a Voi scooter to your place of work. So this is the start. These are the things that we're starting to look at now. It's about these connected journeys, and from that, of our users, and this is another survey that we conducted in our safety report, is 63% of Voi users reported that they combined e-scooters with public transport before COVID-19. And so we're paying close attention to this, and we're trying to integrate now into mobility as a service applications. So the idea is that you have combined ticketing. If you buy a train ticket, you also get a scooter ticket. And so you start to shift the way people use transport, because I think the issue of trains before might have been expensive parking at the station, or lack of availability of parking at the station. B, it wasn't end-to-end. If you get on a train, you still kind of need to take a taxi or something, or you might need to walk really far. So the idea is now with an e-scooter at both sides at either point of the journey, before you get to the station and when you get off at the next station, you are now having an end-to-end solution in terms of travel. And I think that's what Voi is really focused on. And so this is the last slide. And I just want to leave this here with you, really. This is our 15-minute city vision at Voi, and this is in our, there's a link there for our annual safety report that in your own leisure, you could have a look through if you were interested. I'm happy to do like a Q&A and open this up if you guys like. What do you think? Is Richard available?
Yeah, brilliant. I was just looking at the picture with all the numbers on there. That was great. Great, Roberto. That looks like that could be our Abington Street in Northampton. We'll have to mock that up differently. We've got quite a few questions. I'll fly through and throw them at you, Roberto, if that's okay. Have you got any information on the Corby trial?
Yeah, I mean, I can pull some stuff together. It's probably a bit difficult to get it right now, because we've got dashboards.
That's something you could share with us. We can share with people afterwards.
Yeah, I can follow up if you want, like on an email or something like that. Depends how you guys how you want to do it.
Yeah, well, we'll do it probably on our socials. So if I'll follow up with you on email, and then we'll do it with a social thread. Yeah,
sure. My colleague Tom Williams is actually dealing with the Corby, so I'd in the first instance want to get an update from him before I sort of share anything.
I think we talked about doing potential follow-up event anyway, didn't we, in the future, once we can meet physically. So yeah, if you get something on Corby and Kettering, that would be great. Any idea on the average age of subscribers? Yeah, so I've looked at distribution quite a lot, and it's usually between 20 and 30. There's a peak, there's a huge peak at sort of 23, 24, and then it sort of tails off. There's a long tail of users after 23, 24. So that's the general distribution of our users, fairly young, to be honest with you. But I think I don't know if you've ever heard of there's a model called the early adopters, the early majority, the late majority, and the laggards. You ever seen that? Like, it's the innovation model, and you get this bell curve. I think we're still in the phase of the early adopters. And so those tend to be the younger people. But what we're starting to see now is, over time, the usage is increasing for older people, like 30 plus, really, because these people sort of want to see other people use it first, and then when it's proof of concept has been realized, and then they start to adopt it. So I think we'll see a shift in that age profile slightly over time. Okay, good stuff. And you mentioned some of the stats. Are the 23,000 riders, 11% of Northampton, all subscribers, or does it also include pay-as-you-go?
No, so that's most of those would be pay-as-you-go still. They're just unique users.
That last slide you brought up there was like that high street and your sort of vision. Are you talking to anybody in Northants about that? Who do you deal with locally?
Yeah, so I mean, we deal with the Northampton Council. We deal with obviously the local police, the councillors too. So you saw that on the first slide there as well. We had the council representative, and we also had the councillor, which was Jason Smithers. So I think these are longer term visions. It does depend a lot on government funding and what the provision is for their funding and infrastructure. But I mean, the vision's there, and I think if we can slowly start to chip away at it over time, we can create these changes and or shifts in pattern.
Yeah, well, now is a great time. I think Corby, I've said to people, Corby and Northampton have got a lot of funding for the town centre renewals. So if that could be built in to some of what you're doing, and if there's extra funding available through you guys to support what you're doing, that sounds like it could be a real win-win.
For sure, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, that was great, Roberto. Really good feedback in the chat. I don't think there's any more questions, so I think we will probably end it there. That was great. Thanks very much.
You. Thanks everyone for attending. And yeah, please do connect with me if you've got any questions on LinkedIn or anything about the trial. If you want to somehow try and participate in or look at parking hubs or anything like that, please reach out and I can connect you as well.